Hey guys, Youngblood with you for the 82nd episode of the Inbox. Starting off with a question from Andrew LeBrun saying, question, I've been looking at the 890 Jump as a ship I want to pick up, but it gets so much hate wherever I look, and judging by the brochure, I don't understand it. If you have better insight, please explain it. Well, the question there's a little bit vague, Andrew, but I think overall, I mean, every ship in the game can get some hate or be seen as not valuable or anything like that, depending on perspective. The 890 Jump is a ship that is very expensive. It's a luxury ship, and a lot of those luxury vehicles kind of seem to have a limited usage in a lot of people's minds. For me, I'm kind of more in the combat category, so I tend to choose combat capability over something like luxurious accommodations. But if you're looking for a ship that's going to serve as like a meeting center for dignitaries or VIP transport or some exploration or some cargo ability, or just kind of touring around the verse, then the 890 Jump's a really good option, especially if you have a lot of people. Now we've got the 600i out. That's a kind of a smaller version of that ship that's going to be a little bit cheaper to maintain and to use, like as far as operating cost. But there's nothing really about the 890 that should be really, I guess, poo-pooed outside of the price. It's going to do a good job. The luxurious components are going to perform well. It's going to be able to defend itself relatively well. I'm guessing it'll be relatively fast for a ship of that size. So I think there's a lot of good about this ship, but it's when you start comparing what it does to the price, you don't have that same value that you would assess to something like a different type of ship. So I think that's where it's mostly coming from. Knights Gaming says, hey STL, first off, I've really enjoyed my fights against you. I love that every time I see you in AC, you're flying a different ship. Thank you. Yeah, I like to mix it up, and it's good fighting everybody. As for my question, I have about $1,250 spent on my account. I'm a competitive dogfighter, usually top 100. I have a Hurricane and a Saber set aside for that purpose, but I also have a bunch of friends that have pledged and want to play with me around 3.0 and on. Our hope is that we can do a combination of exploration, cargo hauling, and bounty hunting. My current setup is a Hurricane Saber, Avenger ×3, Cutlass, Freelancer, Dirk, Carrick, Archimedes. Do you think this is a good setup based on a group of 12 to 15 considering our varied interests? Yeah, I mean, I think based on what you want to do, if you start talking about exploration, you've got the Freelancer, Dur, and the Carrick in there. If you talk about cargo hauling, you've got the Avenger, which can do a little bit of that. The Freelancer can do a little bit of that. The Carrick can carry quite a bit. Bounty hunting, you've got the Avengers there that can take care of that, as well as the Hurricanes and the Sabers. I think if you wanted to really kind of branch out a little bit, you can consider the new Cutlass. Oh, you did have a Cutlass in there. Okay, the Cutlass provides you a little bit of extra versatility there. I think you've got a pretty well-rounded fleet there. You've got a couple Archimedes that'll do well with, racing if you want to kind of drift into that. But no, I mean, honestly, it's a long question, but a short answer. I think your setup is pretty good. We could start talking about maybe adding in like an electronic warfare ship like the Herald or something like that to kind of facilitate things like bounty hunting. But honestly, based on your fleet setup, I think you're fine. Terraton Tom says, hey Youngblood, first off, love your channel, thank you. Find it very informative and hope that you keep it up. I'm planning on it. I know this might be a question you've answered before, but as it stands right now, would you still recommend the Constellation as a good, well-rounded ship? I went and upgraded from a Freelancer to an Andromeda before I started reading up on how the ship got beat around the head with a Nerf stick in terms of mobility and combat. Do you think the Constellation will be restored to its capable dogfighter status? If not, what other ship would you recommend I look at in terms of fulfilling cargo merchant role that has some bite behind it? In regards to fulfilling the cargo merchant role, I mean, you're absolutely right in picking the Andromeda, and the Andromeda is going to be a capable combat ship as well. The one thing you want to be aware of, though, is the phrase you used was capable dogfighter. And the Constellation as really kind of a freighter isn't going to be something that's a dogfighter. The adjustments to its speed and agility were probably right to have happened. So it's going to not necessarily be able to break dance. Now, if you're talking about a Constellation versus a Starfarer, then that's certainly going to be a lot more agile, and it's going to be able to kind of run circles around it. So there's a little bit of perspective as far as, what you're fighting against. A Saber is always going to fly circles around a Constellation, but a Constellation also has the P-52 it can drop. It can have the two turrets, as well as its forward-facing weaponry and missiles. So it's going to be a capable fighter, but it's not going to be a capable dogfighter. So that's an important distinction to kind of keep in your mind. The Constellation is still a really good, well-rounded ship. It's something that should meet your needs. It's Chris Roberts' favorite ship as far as we know, so I think it's something that's going to continue to get love and be a good quality ship that a lot of people are going to be using. So I would still feel pretty confident there. Just you got to have realistic expectations going into it of what it's going to be for you. F9 says, question, gunships, why don't we see many of them, concept or release? Do you think we might see more ships in this category later on? And what might those ships be, and how do you think they'll be balanced for Star Citizen? So gunships are a tricky thing from a balance perspective because, using CIG's favorite terms, they punch above their weight class. It's essentially a ship that's made to deal more damage than really anything else in the game, outside of something like a capital ship or torpedo bomber, like that sort of thing. But as far as what it is, it's sustained aggressive damage that can go up against a larger target than itself, or can really make quick work of smaller targets depending on the speed. So I think based on that, they're having a hard time really balancing the mechanics of gunships out. We've got the Redeemer in place today. That was part of the Next Great Starship, which also included, several other offerings, which I wouldn't be surprised if get implemented at some point, like the Scimitar, for example, is one that I'd really like to see in there. But regardless, I think we're going to see more gunships. It's going to happen, and we kind of see a couple that blend into that category. The new Cutlass has a lot of weaponry on it. It's got more teeth than it had before, so in a way, it's almost like a gunship. You can look at something like the Hurricane and say, based on the size of the ship and the weaponry that it brings, it kind of borders on that as well. So there's going to be some that I think will eventually be kind of crossovers, but as far as true gunships, I think they need to figure out how it gets balanced with the Redeemer, and then they'll start planning on how they can add more in. Samuel Gerardo says, "Hey STL, love your work. To what extent do you think we'll be able to explore alien systems? I plan to be a trader operating on the fringes of human space away from the UEE, and would love to buy and sell guns and ship components to the Xi'an or Banu. Essentially, do you think we'll just have limited interactions in UEE space, or will we be able to land on and explore on alien-controlled worlds?" If the planet's there, you're going to be able to land on it. There may be some restrictions as far as like local laws or customs or the way you need to do it. But the idea behind everything is that you can really go wherever you want. Through the lore, we know that there's some like Banu systems or like Banu planets to where you can only enter certain areas of the city. I think the Xi'an, no, I think that was the Xi'an. Either way, one of the alien races says like you can only go in certain areas. But as far as the exploration goes, I mean, you could probably land anywhere, but you may face consequences, or if the worlds are a little bit more restricted, you may end up having like guided landing type of situations. But you're not going to just be forced to explore in UEE space. If you can travel somewhere, you can do your exploration there. Tor Nilsson says, "ASDL, love your vids, thank you. Do you think we'll see anything like a military spy ship that could play a space SR-71 Blackbird, something that would fly unprotected into enemy territory, taking pictures and scanning important information, and basically being almost too fast to be shot down? That would be an interesting idea and could be pretty cool, just pissing off the enemies that are unable to do anything about you flying past them." It's kind of in-game already. The Drake Herald is almost in that category. Now, it's not really an explorer, but you're not really talking about that. You're talking about getting into enemy lines and catching information. The Drake Herald is essentially a flying like reconnaissance and kind of pest ship. It's meant to really do like hacking and info collection and transportation, like that sort of thing. It's pretty much the fastest ship in a straight line right now. So it basically is your equivalent to the SR-71 Blackbird. It doesn't look anything like it. It's not slick. It's not, like super like futuristic looking like the Blackbird was. But as far as just the gameplay mechanic you're looking for, I mean, the Herald is basically that too, as close as it's going to get. And the last questions are patron questions, with another one from Sketchy being first. How gimped do you think medium-large ships will be without max crew? I think it's going to depend on the ship. Like a Hull C, for example, I think has a crew of 5, but I think you could do relatively well with 1 or 2 people on board that ship. If you start talking about something like a Constellation, which is kind of a medium-sized ship, if you're flying it solo, you're going to be limiting your ability to kind of man the snub nose and the 2 turrets. Now, you do get some capabilities back if we get to the point to where you can actually control your turrets through the avionics blades they've talked about. But it's just going to kind of depend. If that goes up to, let's say an Idris, for example, that may have like 25 people on board. Well, if your crew is 25 people, but you're only running it with 15, you're obviously not going to be at maximum efficiency, and you're going to sacrifice somewhere. It depends on what the situation you're in to how that ends up impacting things at the end of the day. Turrets are going to be relatively easy to manage, I would think, but if you have to shuffle people around to do repairs or power management, or running from turret to turret or something like that, you may not have all the fighter pilots able to actually launch them and have you operating at full efficiency. So your max crew size is what you should probably have if you're going out and you're going to need full capabilities. But you could probably get by without doing that. You just need to really find what the right number is and then fill in with NPCs as needed. And our last question is going to be Renegade Hunter 3 Dakota. What all will the science role consist of? Science is one of those areas that's not really fleshed out in the game yet. You know, we've got some ships that we know are kind of catering towards that, like the Reliant Sin and the Endeavor, and then different modules that are going to help you get that done. So there's going to be two gameplay styles that I think are going to kind of live side by side. You're going to have exploration, which is going to be more about finding things, and then science, which is going to be more about researching them. Now, science is also going to spin off, and we know, like, for example, on the Endeavor, you have the Super Collider to where you can actually start doing, like, tweaking of components and overclocking and those types of things. So I think what science is really going to be is analysis of information that you find, you know, figuring out how you can make a profit off of it, you know, making changes to components to be able to get better performance out of them, maybe changing like elements and those types of things. So I think it's going to be a fairly complicated gameplay mechanic, but unfortunately we just haven't really had it fleshed out by CIG yet to really say this is what it's going to be, but I think it's almost going to be a sort of branch of exploration in a way. So that's it, this episode of The Inbox. If you guys have questions, let me know. Otherwise, stay tuned for more and have a wonderful day. Take care.